So finally, second to the last technical category, we have Best Sound Mixing, and the nominees are American Sniper, John Wrights, Greg Rudloff, and Walt Martin; Birdman, John Taylor, Frank A. Montano, and Thomas Varga; Interstellar, Gary A. Rizzo, Greg Landaker, and Mark Weingarten; Unbroken, John Taylor, Frank A. Montano, and David Lee; and Whiplash, Craig Mann, Ben Wilkins, and Thomas Curley. Now, like I mentioned in my video for Best Sound Editing, I'm always kind of disappointed with the Academy because they always seem to nominate the same movies for both of these categories when I do think that there is a significant difference between the two. Like the only difference here this year is that The Hobbit, The Battle of the Five Armies, which is nominated for Best Sound Editing, has now been swapped out for Whiplash, which is nominated here. This is our list, so I will put them in order of who I think was most deserving of the Oscar. So at fifth place, I'm going to put American Sniper. Now, I kind of have the same comments with this movie in terms of sound mixing as with sound editing, in that the sound really is very kind of standard issue war movie, which is to say that it's actually very good sound. All the firefights sound very authentic with all the shouting in the background that comes along with it. And it's interesting that we as viewers become more attuned to loud noises after watching these firefights. When we watch the scenes where Chris Kyle is just at home, when we hear a loud noise or barking from a dog, we are just kind of as paranoid as him. So we do kind of feel his post-traumatic stress disorder, like how he's feeling it. But ultimately, I'm putting this at number five because it's ultimately too safe, I think, and standard issue to really kind of deserve an Oscar nomination, in my opinion, in this category. Because I really did find that the sound didn't necessarily add that much to the experience as I watched it. Now, at number four, interestingly enough, I'm going to put Interstellar. It's been a very long time since I saw Interstellar, which I only saw once. But I do remember there being this crispness to the sound overall in every single environment. This is one thing that Interstellar really kind of has in its arsenal, the fact that it has a lot of environments to play around with, the different planets back home on Earth. And I remember that throughout all these environments, there was this sense of the air being dead, which really kind of allowed everything else to really sound much clearer and much more isolated. And by dead, I mean that there were no birds kind of in the air in the background, or there wasn't that much background noise or chatter at all. So when you did hear sounds on screen, they just felt a lot more isolated and alone in the environment. And I'm still not sure if my understanding of the difference between sound editing and sound mixing is perfect. I know it's not. Although, yeah, like I still really would credit Interstellar sound more with sound editing than mixing. But I'm not necessarily sure, but whatever. Now, number three, I'm going to put Unbroken. Unbroken also has the benefit of having just this plethora of environments to be able to play around with, different kinds of soundscapes. You have the two Japanese prisoner of war camps that Louis Zamperini ends up going to. They both have very different kinds of terrain. You have that whole sequence where he's on the raft with his two comrades. And there's that one scene where he goes to like this Japanese building place that's a lot more quiet than the other environments, and it really kind of hammered home the fact that this environment was really kind of sterile and safe compared to the other environments. And I specifically remembered while I was watching the movie, there was this moment where I noticed background noise. I noticed the sound of like maybe a river or birds and stuff, and I noticed how faint it was. That the sound was able to kind of suggest distance and being hidden away from like this safety and these nice things. But I still would also credit the sound in Unbroken more to the sound editing, which I think takes more center stage. Because the sound mix itself in this movie, while it is good, it still doesn't do anything that truly impresses me. Now, at number two, I'm going to put Birdman, and the sound in Birdman really, really pleasantly surprised me because they could have easily just kind of half-assed this movie in terms of sound. This movie didn't demand really, really crisp sounding things, but every little detail here, audio-wise, in this movie is just so consistently involving. Like it really just makes you feel like you're there with the characters as they walk around. And I wanna, point out that it's extremely difficult to keep sound clear as characters constantly move throughout the set, because of how the hallways kind of change size and whatnot. You have to also adjust your sound there. And it's impressive that the sound team here was still able to give you a sense of direction, a sense of where the sounds were coming from, even as these characters were moving around. And as they were moving around, the backgrounds always felt kind of authentic. Like as they went out onto the street, you would hear the sounds from the street and etc. etc. And there are very slight changes in, I don't know what the term is, but in how the echoes kind of change as the characters move from on stage to off stage to outside. It's all very, very well done. But of course, at number one, and who I think deserved the Oscar, was of course Whiplash. And seriously, compared to all the other nominees in this list, like Whiplash is head and shoulders above the rest because Whiplash is all about the sound. This movie literally would have just kind of failed if the sound mixing wasn't good, but thankfully it is spectacular. Every single instrument in this movie sounds like a force of nature, not just the drums, but the wind instruments and the brass and whatnot. But it's still not just about the instruments. Like every other kind of sound is still mixed very well. In that the voices amid the music are still very very clear. The chaos and the noise that eventually erupt from the musical sequences, they're never blaring. And they're always very, very coherent. You still know exactly what's going on. In fact, you kind of hear each instrument even more clearly because of how well produced this whole thing is audio-wise. And it never feels like they toy around with the audio levels to try and really kind of isolate one thing like unrealistically. Like if someone's talking, they don't make that person's voice louder than the instruments playing. So it's all really just equally leveled. And you might be able to argue that um, all the music playing is part of the score, not necessarily part of the sound mix. But for me, it's undeniable that there was a lot of live playing throughout the actual movie, and these live instruments were mixed very well. And my official prediction for who I thought would win the Oscar was Whiplash because it was really all about the sound, and thankfully it did win. So I'm very very happy about that. Alright, so those are my thoughts about the best sound mixing category at this year's Oscars. Who did you think deserved to win? What did you think about Whiplash winning? Whatever you thought, whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.